Welcome to Haig's Business Winners, a club that brings together leaders, industry experts, entrepreneurs, startups, and those willing to share their business experiences and learn from others. Just like my podcast, Other Side of the Business Card, we explore business conversations with humanity, humor, and passion. Listen in as we uplift, motivate, and learn from each other.
So welcome to Haig's Business Winners. Every week or so, Haig invites somebody who he knows in his network and or has reached out to talk about something that just relates to life, to the problems that are going on in business and in the world right now. And today we are joined by the amazing Mike Andrews, and we are going to be having a conversation all about drone technology and building global organizations. Can't wait to dive into that content and that conversation today. So Mike, welcome to the Haig's Business Winners show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm just so you know how it works, Mike. We have a bunch of followers. We are just inviting some people in, although really we're using Clubhouse, which is a great platform to record people all around the world for our podcast as well. So as you know, that's what we do. Mike and I go back, I guess, a couple of years, right? We got introduced through a very good mutual friend, and actually probably even 3 years now, because that was the last time I went to one of those healthcare conferences, the Morgan Stanley one in San Francisco, and so I think that's when we first connected. So we both endured the ups and downs of the pandemic with our multiple businesses, and lucky to say we both came through. So, and today I'm excited to again bring into Haig's Business Winners. We're going to basically talk to Michael Andrews, for those of you listening in, and a lot of you will listen after the show. He's founder, CEO, investor, and strategic advisor. He's got a private investment firm called Hawkstone Capital, and he's a CEO of Paper Airplane, which I love the name, and I can't wait to hear more about it, because I know lots happened since we've spoken years ago. Again, you've got a really impressive portfolio of work, Michael, proven track record of developing global business strategies, and I was in awe of the way you managed to run so many of these kind of highly technical, complex businesses. Today, we're kind of really interested in discussing the power of drone technology. Actually, Paul, Abigail, and I were at a drone type of conference as well in London. But you run drone technology for global organizations, which tie into one of your businesses, Paper Airplane. We're really not here just to talk about that. We can talk about any of the other investment areas that you see. But we're going to certainly start off with that. So maybe, Michael, why don't we just start out with you talking about your experience and how you got into drone technology. So, Michael, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to. So it actually, if you look back through my career, it really spent over half of my career in kind of large corporate America. I ran about half a Fortune 500 company called General Cable Corporation, who was a manufacturer of copper and aluminum wiring. And I ran their global energy and infrastructure group. So it was wiring cable products sold into largely energy markets like electric utility companies, generation facilities, oil and gas, mining, and then a whole host of these little niche market businesses. And it was really through that pushed me down this path of sustainability, clean tech, but data-driven decision making. And how that happened was one of the businesses that reported to me was a test group. So we did partial discharge failure testing of medium voltage utility products. So essentially, and largely still, many industries use preventative maintenance for upgrading large infrastructure assets, and electric utility companies do this by practice. So what would happen is a utility would choose a segment of the grid to upgrade, and they would send samples of that product back to us to test. And what we found is as much as half of the product they were sending back to us was perfectly good cable, would have lasted decades longer and that because they weren't using data to drive their decision making, they were in aggregate as an industry wasting hundreds of millions of dollars in unnecessary capital expenditures. And so then as you go through that kind of career, I left General Cable in 2009 and started Hawkstone Capital. And originally Hawkstone Capital was a merchant bank working exclusively with water and energy related clean tech companies, with a focus on how you use sustainable technology to help companies lower operating costs, extend the life of assets, and reduce their environmental footprint, which for me, is all accomplishable, right? The clean technology doesn't have to add cost to a company; it can actually save cost. And through that process, I got involved in a couple of different data analytics businesses. And if you look back at when I was doing the partial discharge failure testing, like before drones were even commercially available. So fast forward 10 years, drones become commercially available. We're now able to put various types of sensors on drones, to gather data that allows us to inspect and assess the condition of that asset to then do predictive maintenance. And I'll make one last statement, I'll stop talking. But so really for me, the whole idea of drones and sensors is moving industry. This is going to be applied to basically any asset, from manual inspection, which is highly inaccurate, and preventative maintenance, which doesn't use data to drive that decision, to automated inspection and predictive maintenance using drones and sensors and machine learning to do predictive analytics, that help companies make better decisions on how to manage their assets. So I'll stop there. But that's how I
Great.
kind of came from large corporate America into this data analytics world.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I want to get back into the 2009 and your mindset of how you got in there. But before that, I just want to introduce Kev, if he is available, just to set up the room. I've got the police searching for me outside, but hopefully they're not going to catch me. But I'm just trying to invite some more people in. Kev, are you there to speak or not?
I am. Hello and welcome. I miss you, mate. It's been a while, and welcome back to the UK.
Thank you.
I'm happy to take the room and set it up for you if that's what you like.
Yes, please go ahead.
Absolutely. Hello and welcome to Clubhouse, and welcome to Haig's Business Winners. Our special guest today is Michael Andrews. Hello, Michael. It's going to be great to listen to you today. Haig's Business Winners, as you know, is a weekly basically a room that we get together. We speak about everything to do with business, entrepreneurial, scale up, you name it. We talk about it in this room, and the experts in this room are in the room right now. We have the beautiful Abigail Barnes, time management, one of her books which I read, called Productivity Strategist and Online Trainer. She's a time management author. I've read the book. I've got it right in front of me, actually, to be honest with you, believe it or not. And I've read it about 3 times now. Certain sections of the book, you've got to get the book. Get it. It's a fantastic book, and it really does help. Then we've got the fantastic Paul Vatistas, comes in every week, and he's a fantastic human being, comes in, gives his heads up on what's going on around the world, and his opinions really do matter. Then we have the lovely Sarah Flindle. She's the Chief of Staff at Haig Barrett Partners. We got Sharina. She's what I call the social media goddess. She calls herself a strategist. No, you're a goddess, love. Then we've got our special guest, of course, Mike. Then we've got the beautiful, smiley Julie Wong, who's, again, a financial performance coach. Thank you for being here, Julie. Then finally, we've got some friends down below. We've got Kurt and we've got Jordan. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Kev Walkian in the purple, and the main man himself is Haig Armaganian. And he's the man with the turquoise background and the very gorgeous pinky purple shirt. If you're not following the room, please do. It's Haig's Business Winners, that little greenhouse on the top. We are on every single week on Thursdays between 4 and 5. Do join us. But I'm going to pass it back over to Haig so he can let Michael fill us in with drone technology. Back to you, Haig. Was that too much? Just out of interest, because I think Haig's now gobsmacked. He can't even unmute his mic.
No, I've got trouble getting on the internet here, but it's okay. I'm with the normal network system, so I apologize for any poor connections here. No, I am also gobsmacked with what Michael Andrews has been able to do with his career, and of course where you are now is absolutely amazing. So I just want to go back to 2009 because a lot of our listeners are entrepreneurs and into starting the business. I guess what made you take the plunge out of pretty much what was probably a very reliable corporate career you could have had, and to make that jump in 2009 and jump into something that you really were passionate about?
Yeah, so interestingly, when I took over the global energy infrastructure business for General Cable, oil was trading about $39 a barrel. This was back in early 2000, actually 1999. And when oil and natural gas started rapidly rising in the 2000s, all of a sudden investment into renewable energy, energy efficiency, smart grid technology, those kinds of things were coming into the businesses I ran. And so, for example, back in 2001, our business sold about $10 million into wind farms globally. And when I left General Cable in 2009, we were selling about $400 million a year. But what happened was at the time, I was speaking at energy conferences all over the world, both fossil fuel based as well as clean tech. And when I'd go to these clean tech conferences, I was asked to do CEO roundtables. So I'd go in, sit on a panel, I'd lead a panel, I'd have discussion. And then, as part of the couple of days I was there, I would meet in these little small roundtables with 4 or 5 CEOs of very early stage clean tech companies. And we talk about strategic planning and business planning and capital raising and that kind of thing. And what I found through that was that there were these phenomenal companies out there with great technology, products, services, created by some entrepreneur or scientist or university. But in many cases, these companies were failing because they didn't know how to build a business around that product or technology they developed, and then how to bring that product or technology to market profitably over a sustainable period of time. Well, that's where the combination of both my passion for sustainability and clean tech came in, and combined with my background in running businesses of all shapes and sizes. And so I thought, this is really something that I'm passionate about. This is something that I want to invest both time and money into. And so that was really the draw to start Hawkstone Capital, was to provide those services to the CEOs to help bring these products, technology, services to market. That's how I got started into working with early stage clean tech companies, sustainability companies.
And did you need a lot of funding to get started then, or was it something that kind of landed on your lap because of the connections you had?
Well, no. So originally, the companies and opportunities came to me because at that point, again, I was speaking at conferences on a very regular basis. And so what I would do is engage with companies where I was both investing both monetarily and in terms of my time to assist them. So never passive investments. I always made active investments. So would invest in a company and then take some sort of role, whether it be a board role, interim CEO, advisory role, to just help build the business processes and structure and manufacturing platforms, quality systems, sales channels, to then bring that product or technology to market. And so that's what I was doing, and then helping them from that role raise capital externally.
I love what you do, and I could listen to you talk for hours. I think this is, I say the same thing every single time we have a guest on Haig Show, because he really brings amazing, like the top people who are at the top of their games. So you've done what you do with many organizations. So it's almost like, I guess, you have a formula or a blueprint. So there's two questions to this strand. The first question is what is the first thing you would typically address with the organizations that you first start working with, that you identified, and it's kind of like, I've done this so many times before, this is the first thing that we have to do. So that's the first question. And then the second question is, has that changed, and how has that changed in the last couple of years with everything that's been going on? So hopefully those questions are clear, and I would love to hear your thoughts on them. I'll hand the mic over to you, Mike.
Sure. So I think the best way to start is kind of how I've identified companies, and I do have a formula for the type of company that Hawkstone gets involved with. And what I say to people is, I'm not an engineer by background. I'm not a technologist, so I don't place bets on technology. So for me, that baseline is the company has to be have third-party tested, proven technology or product, revenue positive with repeat sales. And I say repeat sales because so many times companies, you can put product into the market, but when somebody reorders that product or that service is when they liked it, they want to buy it, and they're going to keep building it. And so that's for me kind of a baseline. The second step is having a conversation with that CEO. And I tell people I can tell within 5 minutes whether it's an opportunity for Hawkstone or not, because that CEO needs to, one, kind of understand that they need help, right? And be willing to accept help. And if the CEO isn't willing to do that, doesn't understand that, or just says, I just want money or need money, then that's not an opportunity for Hawkstone. So those are the two kind of baseline of what we look for before we engage with a company. And then from there, it really comes down to what I call the 100-day plan. So every business that I've ever been involved with, I've ever kind of taken over. So as I think about my career at General Cable, I started with a little $50 million business. It was organized in a strategic business unit. So I had P&L responsibility. And over the course of 15 years, that went from 1 to 9 businesses selling into 15 different markets. And in each one, whether it be a startup within General Cable or whether it was me taking over another business, I would go through this process that I developed over that period of time called a 100-day plan, which is just assessing various aspects of the business to then understand where to best allocate time, where the issues exist, where the team needs help.
Amazing, love it. And so how has that sort of process and methodology really changed then for you over the last couple of years with all of the uncertainty, wars, a global pandemic, those kinds of things? What have you been sort of having to focus on more? Has it become more tactical?
It clearly has had a major impact on a number of different things, and some in very negative ways, and some in very positive ways. Right. So if you think over the last kind of couple of years, things that have happened, obviously the pandemic created large distress on lots of early stage companies. It made it more difficult to operate. It made it more difficult to land new accounts because nobody was traveling, nobody wanted to see something, and people were so kind of focused on what was going on in their life and in just their job. They didn't look to think to expand. So that part of it, I think, was very difficult. Having said that, at the same time, this concept of and passion around global warming and sustainability and ESG all started coming back into focus. And whereas I would say back in the early 2000s, the focus in sustainability and clean tech was largely driven by oil and gas prices. Um, and then you saw a collapse in the market when the solar market crashed. Um, the It wasn't really part of um, a broader corporate strategy. Whereas now I think you see sustainability, whether it be in terms of um, reducing carbon footprint to buying, installing rooftop solar for renewable energy to installing EV charging stations. All those kinds of things now are becoming much more not only mainstream, but they're being written into corporate strategies. And shareholders are requiring companies to do that. Companies are on their own putting in some more strict regulations, even than government regulations that have been written. And so I think that idea is here to stay. And for me, over time, I've always made the comment, at least for me, that I was never interested in getting involved with a company that required subsidies to be in business or that increased the cost for their client. Because for me, the companies that create the most value, that are the best partners for their clients, are the ones that achieve the three goals I talked about before, which is exactly what Paper Airplane does through the work that we do. It's we help our clients lower their operating cost. We extend the life of their assets. So reducing waste, reducing capital investment by identifying early maintenance issues so this can be repaired before they become kind of catastrophic problems. And the third is reducing their environmental footprint. So you think about the types of services that we offer. We put various types of sensors on drones. It doesn't necessarily need to be drones either. We can use satellite data, fixed wing data, drone data, handheld devices. It's really about the type of sensor used and the information gathered, and then what you do with that data to help get insight to how that asset is aging. And from there, now you can actually make a data-driven decision versus, again, going back to preventative maintenance, which basically, some spreadsheet says, okay, this asset has extended, it is outlived its useful life, it should be replaced, right? Without having any idea actually how that asset is aging. And by the way, all assets age differently depending upon the environment they're in, how hot they're run or they're used, the elements they're exposed to, any type of damage caused. And so without that data, we can't make good business decisions. And so that's how, for me, data analytics and drones and sensors came into this whole thought process around sustainability and clean tech.
I absolutely love it, Mike. And I am not really a data person. That is sort of Haig's area of expertise. I'll hand the mic back to him in a minute. But when you describe what it is that your technology does and how it actually does it in a day and age that we are entering into, it just makes so much sense. And off of the back of this event that Paul, Haig and I attended, the whole conversation around drones and around what this technology actually is, I think there is so much more to it than just the word drone. The assumption of what it actually does is such a misleading one compared to the sheer capability. I mean, they had conversations around how this technology, let's call it, was able to be used for search and rescue and save people's lives. So the fact that it can be used in business and as well as lives. And just sort of discounting the whole kind of real conversation about dropping food in your back garden if it was going to be used for deliveries, which, you know, who knows what's going to happen in the future. But yeah, I love it. So thank you so much for really explaining that. There is one follow-on question that I have before I hand the mic back to Haig, and that was really, I guess, what sectors you are enjoying using this technology with, and are there any other sectors that you would like to see it being adopted by?
Thank you. Yeah, I think the opportunity set is huge. You can apply it to almost any physical asset, at least the type of sensors and data gathering that we're doing. So we're gathering imagery that is very unstructured data that we then process into structured data, creating these survey grade accurate three-dimensional models that not only allow you to really inspect that asset, but you can zoom in and zoom out. You can look at it three-dimensionally. When you zoom in, you can actually see every individual frame that was taken of the area that you're looking at. So you can see that could be a problem area, could be a specific part of an asset you want to review from multiple different angles. So in terms of where we participate, our roots go back to the oil and gas space and environmental services. So inspecting pipelines and oil platforms and that kind of thing for emissions and leaks and maintenance repair so that they don't become problems. And as we've then grown from that, we've expanded into commercial industrial real estate, so large infrastructure buildings. We just did a million square foot distribution, cold storage distribution warehouse that we were able to do an inspection and assessment of the roof, but also through a thermal scan, identify where they were losing that the cooling from the inside that allowed them to fix an issue that could lower their costs and identify a problem by adding insulation. So commercial industrial real estate, we're in agriculture. So looking at primarily sports facilities, golf courses, those kinds of things, again, to help those people lower water usage, reduce herbicides, reduce pesticide usage, and better maintain those assets. And finally, electric utility companies. So the transmission distribution grid infrastructure, which really, kind of came to light and has been really now talked very heavily about with PG&E in California when it was determined that it was infrastructure that caused a lot of the forest fires in California, and that by using drones and sensors, you could better inspect those assets and solve a lot of those problems. But to answer your question,
Right.
the opportunity is almost endless. You can see this being used across almost any physical asset, bridges, roads. We've done mines where we scan the inside of a mine to identify adits where they were getting water coming in and heavy metals were flowing out. So the opportunity set, I think, is endless.
Well, thanks, Michael, and thanks, Abigail and Sarah, for those questions. I want to just jump into a couple more kind of use cases of the industries that I'm very interested in. I think you mentioned agriculture, so maybe something around agriculture and oil and gas for myself. I'm kind of interested in terms of from the start to finish of an opportunity, because obviously I have a lot of clients in these areas. Some of the timing too, from when they see a need and they talk to you, how long it takes for you to literally start implementing something, and whether you've got a big data phase, before the use of any drones, that has to basically help them decide whether it's worth going into the deeper dive. But I want to just get an idea of timing a project from start to finish.
Sure. So, I'll start with the question you asked about agriculture, and I'll tell you how we kind of expanded into that market and what happened. So that was actually an interesting project. The original project, we were asked to do a survey grade accurate scan of a golf course that was going to be made into a video game. And so we had certain parameters that we needed to meet in terms of clarity and accuracy and those kinds of things. And so we did the scan and we were processing the data again, going from literally, this is not a video. What we do is literally take thousands of images that are then all processed together to create these survey grade accurate three-dimensional models. And when we started sending the data to our client, we got a phone call saying there's something wrong with your data. And we had a call with them and we're like, well, let's talk through that. So we started talking through it and we said, well, no, there's nothing wrong with our data. There's something wrong with your golf course. And what it turned out is as we were gathering this data and we were creating these models, we could identify where they were overwatering and where they were underwatering. We could identify where they had
Wow.
infestations that they needed to address. Whereas now, golf courses basically put fertilizer across 18 holes, right? The entire thing. We're saying, no, you don't need to do that because I can show you exactly where you've got either an infestation, where you need to provide fertilizer. And so what we did was we ended up, the groundskeeper got more value out of the data we had collected than they did for the video game. And so then we just basically took that to other markets and started showing how, with the sensors we were using, the data we were gathering, how we could help them lower their maintenance costs, lower their operating costs. Same thing in the oil
Great.
and gas space, right? As I said, if you think about the roots of paper airplane, or in the environmental services space, so it's always about how we help companies identify maintenance issues, lower the likelihood of emissions or spills, um, identify if they've had an issue, what that area is that they need to remediate. Um, and so those are the kind of two, how we got into both of those markets. In terms of
Right.
timing, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just said right. Yeah, go ahead.
So, in terms of timing, um, really the biggest uh, opportunity we have and challenge we have is that is new technology and innovation, right? So you always have that challenge. Right now, for example, roofs on commercial industrial real estate. For the last 100 years, basically, two people put a ladder up and walk around and take a look and say, okay, your roof is okay or it's not okay. So manual inspection, which is fraught with error and omissions and issues, but it's what people have done for a very long time. And so the challenge is helping people understand how they can use technology to better manage their business and move away from something they've done for a very long time to something new. And I think you can say that about any new technology or any innovation. The biggest challenge is getting people to understand it, accept it, and figure out how to use it. So we spend a very large part of our efforts doing demonstrations for companies, right? So we'll get a client on the line and be able to show them through prior projects the quality of the data, the information, how the information is used, and then typically you get a pilot project, and from that pilot project, you then begin expanding a relationship and expanding into other assets that client has.
Brilliant. And just going back to the agriculture example, what kind of percentage saving would they expect? Because I can imagine there's obviously some expenses to do the drone work, and the setup's probably quite high, but once it's set up, it's cheaper to run every year. But what kind of ROI would you get on running these drones on, say, some farmland?
Yeah, typically, we can save people 20 to 25% of the maintenance costs, and it depends on the market segment, right? So in agriculture, they're already inspecting this, but they're doing it from, the groundskeepers walking around and kind of looking, right? And they'll have agronomists come in and provide help, and they'll look at how their water patterns are being used. But that aerial view down allows them to get information they can't possibly gather on the ground. And frankly, it's one of the things we talk about with prospects and clients all the time. Gathering the data and processing the data is not expensive. And then, in fact, like any industry and any new technology, the costs are coming down every year. So the cost of drones and sensors is coming down every year. The quality of the data gathered is increasing and improving every year. So it makes the service very, very affordable, and again, those costs continue to decline every year.
In terms of the data analytics, Michael, do you have, because obviously you've been doing this for a long time, do you have any kind of secret sauce in terms of the algorithms you use or the way that you do it that's hyper efficient? And I guess what I'm asking is, what are your barriers to entry?
Yeah, Haig, I would say that the the processing of the data is becoming fairly standard, right? And there are companies that do it themselves. We have clients that have their own pilots gathering the data, and they hire us to process the data and do the different types of analytics. And so, but where I would say the kind of secret sauce is coming in is in the advancement and development of machine learning and AI to automate processes, identify anomalies much more rapidly than has been able to be done in the past. And that also comes into play. So, one of the things we talk to our clients about is, because what we're doing is creating these survey grade accurate three-dimensional models, when you inspect an asset multiple times over a period of time, I can identify change detection, which you can't do with manual inspection, right? So I can actually overlay those two files and tell you exactly what has changed in that asset from the last time I inspected it to the current time. And then we're able to store those in cloud-based storage that allows us to access those over time as well, to see how an asset is aging, see how it's degrading. Again, go back to that early detection of maintenance issues, and so that's really where I think a lot of the value in the data comes from. And as we continue to create, and I say we as an industry continue to create algorithms and AI, we'll be able to assess those anomalies, faster, better, cheaper.
No, that's wonderful. So where do you see yourself going, I guess, in the next 3 to 5 years? I can imagine that in Europe or outside the US, farms are also much more complicated because they don't farm in as many straight lines maybe as you would get in the Midwest of the United States, right? So there could potentially be even more power in Europe. Are you looking to expand internationally? Are you just going to focus on the US? And then what are there any other kind of parallel or adjacent industries you're looking to get into?
Well, in terms of geographic growth, we're already kind of outside of the US. We have an operation doing some projects in Japan, basically through a relationship, and doing some projects in Mexico, again, through a relationship. And for us, we can process the data that's gathered anywhere, right? And so through the process that we use, we can actually pre-program a drone's flight path to gather the data we need from anywhere. We can actually interact with that drone remotely if there's something we're missing, we need to gather. And then it's all about processing the data and doing the inspection and assessment, which again, we can do from anywhere. So data can be gathered, gets uploaded to the cloud. We can process. I create the reports and deliverables our clients are looking for, and we can push those back out to our client um, as a final deliverable. So we already do some of that now, and I think that will continue to expand as we see opportunities. In terms of market segments, I've always kind of believed in business that you need to maintain a focus, right? And that, as I said, I think the uses of sensors and drones is kind of endless. But we've chosen to try and go deeper rather than wider first, right? Deeper into the market segments we're in and continuing to
Yeah,
grow market share
yeah,
and expand.
yeah.
But
Very wise.
and so
Yeah.
that's really where we see in terms of a vision, right? My vision is, I do see the drone industry a bit like the dot-com industry of 2000, and that there are lots of companies out there that are starting up. I do believe there's going to be some fallout because there are certain ones that create value and others that are just using the word drone to kind of because it's a popular kind of term right now. So for me, the my vision longer term is to raise capital to go acquire four or five or six different companies, complementary companies. So companies that either bring technology or increased market penetration to create the critical mass I think we need to be successful over the long term.
No, I love that, and that's a good vision. And I think I love the idea of going deeper rather than going wider. I'm going to just to reset the room in a minute. Michael, I'm going to open up to questions again from the panel. For those of you who might have just joined us or listening to us today, we're discussing the power of drone technology for global organizations, which ties into Michael's business, Paper Aeroplane. Michael is also the managing partner of private investing firm Hawkstone Capital. Like I said, we don't have too long, but the last 15 minutes want to open up two questions from everybody. So if you can flash your mics if you have a question for Michael. And before Paul jumps in, Michael, thank you already for amazing answers you've given to our questions. Just learning so much about your business. And again, I'm kind of excited to be part of that business in terms of having a client base that really needs to look at this seriously. But over to you, Paul. What's your comment or question? And then if you flash your mics while Paul's speaking, I'll see who's coming next.
Great, thanks, Haig. Michael, I guess my question is really trying to perhaps explore a little bit more the scale of what you can do. And I've got a couple of examples that I'd like to share to perhaps sort of demonstrate what the question's really about. At one level, for example, you might have some chemical process, oil and gas process, or I'm thinking particularly of things like geothermal heat exchangers in a geothermal power plant, where you may need a very small drone to move through and between pipes and actually get into places where human beings might not be able to get, and certainly not while the system's running. So the question's really about, do drones come in all sizes and scales, and can you deal with the level of data that they then provide regardless of that? So at one end I've got this, maybe a small drone running around a heat exchanger. How viable is that? How small can the drones be in terms of what they look at? And then if I can use a sort of more recent example at the other end, was reading recently the Po Valley, which is the Po River is 400 miles long, pretty much running from the French border across to the other side of Italy, across northern Italy, Milan, Lake Como. It's a huge area that is suffering tremendously at the moment from drought. Whole sections of the river are drying up. And it would be good to get real-time data about what's really going on. And obviously a fleet of drones, it might have to be, could provide that on let's say a weekly basis. From your experience at those sort of two extremes, can they both be handled, or is mostly what you're doing something that's in between those two?
So let me start with the first. So you talked about drones, and really for me it comes down to two separate things, right? There's drones and then there's sensors, right? So drones are simply a mechanism for carrying a sensor that's gathering the data. And yes, drones come in all shapes and sizes. We say because we're not a drone company and we're never going to manufacture drones. There are plenty of drones available on the market. What we are experts at understanding the solution our client is looking for, and then what's the best way to gather that data, and then process and analyze that data to provide our client something that's useful to them making a business decision. So we have all different sizes and shapes of drones. We've even used drones to talk about small spaces. We scanned 3,000 feet back into a mine, which was a highly technical type of flight because you no longer have GPS. So you're flying by the sticks, and controlling the drone manually in order to do that. So yes, they can get into tight spaces. And you've got larger drones that can be used for longer, higher, broader types of projects. But again, it really comes down to the sensor. And there are so many different types of sensors available on the market. I'll make the comment again that we're not a sensor manufacturer, but we are experts on sensors available in the market today. And understanding what our clients' requirements are, we then choose the package of both the data gathering mechanism. And you notice I didn't say drone there because there are lots of different data gathering mechanisms and the sensor to gather the data we need, again, to provide that solution to our client. And every day, those are getting better and improving technology, improving accuracy and clarity, with both the sensors and the drones. And when you think about size, and you talked about the river, that's what really then comes down to, all right, what's the best data gathering mechanism in a situation like that where you've got hundreds of miles? There are satellite data you can gather. There's fixed wing data that you can use to gather that information. And in that case, you would probably, depending upon the accuracy and the frequency of the data that you need to collect, you can use, again, satellite data. More likely, you use fixed wing data. So basically, a sensor on a fixed wing plane that can fly 400 miles much faster, better, cheaper than a drone can. But the comment I make all the time about that data is the further away from the source that you're gathering the data, the less accurate the data is. So satellite data is less accurate than fixed wing data. Fixed wing data is less accurate than drone data. Drone data is less accurate than a handheld device. And that's just because the sensors aren't good enough to kind of gather the level of detail you need from further away from the source.
Wow,
Yeah,
very
so
interesting. I was going to say Paul's got a follow-on question. Go ahead, Paul.
So yeah, just picking up on that. So using referring back a little bit to your golf example and maybe also the Poe example. If you were looking at what I would call agricultural field level data gathering for things like yields, for things like fertilizer usage, and so on, how high are you typically flying? Are you 6 feet off the ground, 100 feet off the ground? What sort of level gives you that sufficient? You're sufficiently close that you can collect data quickly, but also get enough of the data that you're really looking for.
Yeah, typically what we do is we're typically never closer than 50 feet, but we typically would go 50 feet, 100 feet, 200 feet, and 400 feet is kind of the AGL, above ground level, that we would fly based on the requirements of the client. And as you think about that, that also has an impact on both accuracy and cost. So the closer you are, the more data you're gathering, the longer it takes to gather that data, the longer it takes to process that data. So it's a little more expensive than at a higher level. You're not quite as accurate, but there's less information to process, and put together. So that's typically how we would do that. And if you look at just agriculture, we don't do row crops. We do specialty crops. We'll do orchards and vineyards, but we're not in the row crop aspect. So cornfields and soybean fields and that kind of thing. But the data is now getting so good that when they gather the data, they can pre-program a tractor to run over that space and only fertilize where it's needed, as an example. You can adjust how and where you are watering in order to balance the water. So you might be overwatering in one place and underwatering in another, but as a total, bring down the amount of water you're using but still increasing the yield from those crops.
That's absolutely fascinating, Michael. Thank you. We can probably have one or two questions before we wrap. Kurt, I think you've got a question. If anyone else has one, flash now, and I'll get you on next. Thank you, Kurt. Welcome.
Yeah, nice to be back, and very interesting conversation. And Haig, I guess I'll start by saying you may be ahead of me on this, but since we're working, while you, Paul, Shay, myself, Sharina, Sarah, Abigail, did I miss anybody? All working on projects with business agility. I mean, this just feels like another arm of being an agile company to have this kind of data available. And you may have already thought about this, but if not, I mean, I think it would be worthwhile getting, after the meeting sometime, talking with Mike about how we could, create some sort of a win-win with, how can you be more agile with the information that's available through this technology? It just, strikes me as something that's definitely worthwhile pursuing. So that's just a sideline. And then a question I have is sort of I guess the elephant in the room question. Mike, I'm just wondering, the big thing about drones right now is, of course, the wonderful amount of information, but of course, what it does to uh, the subject of privacy. And I mean, this is a bigger subject than just one company. But do you have any ideas on, how we're going to balance out the security or privacy issue with the advent of drones and the availability of information that you may not want to be part of? That's it.
Good question, Kurt. Yeah, it's like, does Mama Corn and Baba Corn mind somebody flying over and seeing what they're up to? There you go, Michael.
Yeah, so
Privacy.
I would start by saying, from our perspective, we don't have that issue because we've chosen to do very specific assets, large infrastructure assets that are not around people. We file an FAA flight plan with every project that we do. We are brought in by a client who's made their people or whatever aware that we're going to be on site, and so we're very, very cautious and careful about privacy rights, about information gathered, about how that information is used. And for us, 100% of the data we gather is used for inspection and assessment of large infrastructure assets. Um, so we're not flying crowds, we're not flying people. I think it is a very interesting topic, especially as drones are now used more and more for security and for managing crowds or managing mobs or managing whatever. I know the police force, at least in the U.S., are beginning to use drones for accident recreations and other things. And so, I don't. My personal perspective is that, um, like so many other technologies, I don't think you're not going to stop the use and the growth of drones and sensors. It makes sense, but like anything from your cell phone data to HIPAA data to whatever, I do think that there is legislation, there are debates and discussions that need to be had to figure out how that data can be used, who owns that data, what privacy rights you have. we've just chosen as a company to avoid that by not, being involved in those types of markets.
Great. Are you happy with that,
Thanks.
Kurt?
Yeah, I
Great.
am.
Yeah.
I think that's and just something else that I thought about in terms of, Shay and I are talking with somebody that there's a big agricultural project in Africa that this could be interesting for also, but that's like I said, another side thing we can take later on. But fascinating discussion, really. Thanks a lot.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
Great. So we're coming up the end of the power hour. If anyone's got something burning question, we'll take it. Otherwise, I'm going to thank first of all the panel before I thank Michael for joining us this week. Thank you all, and a special thanks to Michael. What a session! Thank you for sharing your incredible insight into this topic, Michael. Truly fascinating. We've been talking on and off for a few years, but I really think the time has come for people to kind of adopt this kind of technology to stay agile and drive things forward. So a big thank you, Michael, on that. Hope you've enjoyed it.
It's been my pleasure. Yes, I've absolutely enjoyed it. As you can tell, it's something I'm very passionate about. And I think for me, ways for us to improve the environment, lower operating costs, that whole concept of efficiency using data just becomes better and better and lower cost every day, improving so many things around business or community or in the environment. It's one of those services and offerings that there's nothing bad about, right? It's not controversial. It's not, and it improves business. So it's something I love talking about and love seeing that industry grow.
Yeah, just a simple example of the water. If you can save water going into areas that don't need the water, that's already such a great saving. I can imagine the sustainability angle on that is huge. So again, thank you, Michael. And then I'm just going to let everybody know that we have a summary of this session will be available on Instagram and LinkedIn pages. So follow me on both those pages and make sure you get all the updates. And if anyone wants more information on Michael Andrews and one of his companies, Hawkstone Capital or Paper Airplane, then again, if you ping me, I'll get you guys connected. So thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful week. Take care. And see you again soon. Thanks.
Great. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. That's
Thanks, it was
wonderful.
great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this session of Haig's Business Winners Club. Hit the subscribe button to stay updated with all the latest insightful business conversations from industry experts, leaders, and entrepreneurs.